Yeah, I could have emailed him, couldn't I? But someone decides to keep sending spam through my email account, so I go straight to junk, so no one responds. So I have to invite people by paper airplane. Cheers, Kat. Call them up. No, I don't like talking on the phone. Hope to God that they get there. I'm not going to hope to God. I'm not going to, put my faith in that. I'm going to put my faith in something much stronger than that, Kat. Video editing. Yeah, they'll get there. Don't worry.
Is that a paper book? Hey everybody, welcome to Cut Transform Glue. First things first, on the big bot bash you should roll a d20 to define each robot feature. I somehow missed the starting line and rolled for the head, to which I got 17, hot. Then I went back and rolled 13 for the body, a giger body, 15 for the arms, long and thin, and 3 for the hands, which gave me buzz, whatever this means, 11 for the legs, so dash, and for the flavor I rolled 10, jagged. What a weird combination. I had no idea of what giger meant, so I had to Google it, and it's the alien creature designer, I guess, completely out of my comfort zone. This means none of my beloved square and flat shapes with hard angles and edges, and a lot of organic shapes with lots of curves. This is going to be really interesting. Okay, so let's do this. On the beginning of this project, I had just a vague idea of what I wanted to build for the body. So I simply began gluing the shapes I had together, trying to find my way through the project. I wanted to create a gap in between these two shapes and kinda keep them on an angle. The best way to do that while keeping the precision was to use a couple of really old keyboard keys. I sanded the edges and faces of the keys, and then I glued them together, back to back. Then I glued the keys in between the first two pieces, setting an angle on them. You'd see that if I kept the work on the frame, which I clearly didn't. Next thing I did was to try to fill the gap with whatever I could find, just so I could give myself some surface area for the next stage. And this white donut shaped thing would be the head. I had a crazy idea that I wanted to try in this project. You'll see that in the end of the video. I glued it on the top of everything, and then I grabbed that green avocado shape right there, made some changes on it, and glued it on the bottom of the body. This will be where the waist will be attached later, if I'm able to detach myself from this project, of course. I then sanded the remains of my fingertip from the model and grabbed anything I could find to continue closing the gaps, like this super sturdy plastic spoon. To bend it, I had to use a bit of heat, carefully of course. Some extra pieces of styrene on other places, and the body was ready for the next step with a well-known mighty material, epoxy putty. So I mixed a small batch of it and began covering the gaps, not really worrying too much about the look at this moment. The idea here is to add a thick layer that I can later sculpt, instead of trying to model the perfect shape at that point. And even before the epoxy was fully set, I already began removing some material. This is to work fast and also to sculpt while the material is not 100% hardened, which is much easier on the hands, of course. It was a lot of cutting, sanding, and slowly getting to the shape I wanted. After a while, I got to a place that felt close enough, so I then gave it the thickest coat of primer. And then repeated the same processes a couple of times, cutting, refining, and sanding, trying to remove all imperfections. At that point, I also made some simple panel, but not really panel lines, dividing that big body into smaller segments, combined together. Then I reached into my collection of small plastic spoons and added one on one of the sides, right in the front. I began breaking the symmetry of this project. CA glue and lots of baking soda to fill the gaps and reinforce the seam. Then I went for the head, cause this little guy needs a face, of course. Not really sure why, but it was asking for a mysterious look, so I gave it just 3 holes, forming a triangle. To be extra precise, I drew them with a pin vise instead of my big power drill. Chamfered the edges with a dull drill bit, did some light sanding, and I have a crazy idea for this face later on the build, stay tuned. Next thing I did was to cover a whole head on the top of the dome using some greaves, and the bulk of the body and head was pretty much finished. But at that point I went back to the drawing board as I needed to figure out long and thin arms and dash legs. After a couple of minutes I was pretty happy with the overall silhouette of the robot, so I moved forward. I marked the body where the shoulders would be, and then using some sanding sticks I gave myself a flat spot. I reached to my collection of beads and found this shallow dome, perfect for the shoulders. I glued them in place with CA glue, and then again I went back to the epoxy putty to make that seem nice and smooth. As on the previous steps, a lot of cutting, sanding, and refining of the curves, slowly getting to what I wanted. Now the problem with names is getting multiples of the same shape, so I reached in my collection looking for identical pieces. Like for instance, this red one right here was perfect for the job, but I only had one of it, so I went back for an old friend, the Kinder Surprise eggshell. The attachment point was too thin, so I chose hot glue to keep these pieces together, and again, it looks like I was trying to glue myself to this project. For the long and thin arms, I reached for my tubes collection, looking for multiple but good looking shapes. Beads are also very useful for these kinds of stuff. The arms design I decided to go with was pretty simple, so putting it together wasn't a big deal. It actually came together pretty fast. Most of the connections didn't even need glue as they fitted so nicely to each other. I'm also going for fake ball joints on this project as it looks good, matches the Giger design of the body, and are very easy to prepare. Some tiny details on the very tip of the arms. and hot glue again to keep them in place and check the overall look of the thing. And I really liked where this was going. Now, moving down on the body, I started working on a quick waist, and it also came together pretty fast. It is basically a combination of buttons and round shapes glued together. Later I added some epoxy putty to ease the transitions, but I did all of that off camera. And to connect this tiny waist to the body, I also used a button from a dead electronic. The waist ended up being super small, but I really liked this insect look. It kinda works with the design idea. Looking around in my shop, I found an extra dome piece, the same one I used on the wheels of the Sapo project, if you remember. And I really wasn't planning on that, but at that moment I decided to take a small detour from my role for the arms, at least in one of them, and make a shield for this guardian robot. Construction was pretty simple. Some gribblies were attached on the inside of the shield, some surface details covering some unwanted holes on the front and back, and then I replaced the tip of the left arm, going again for a fake ball joint. Again, some hot glue to test the visuals. And I was in love with this shield, the best decision on the whole project so far. But of course I needed to reinforce the buzz aspect of the hands, so I grabbed some buzz looking parts I guess and combined them together, making a weird but menacing sword for this little guy. Some extra beads and details here and there. And with all of this finished, I was ready to start working on the legs. So, as you remember, I wrote dash for the legs, which to me means this guy needs to look agile, swift. So, just as I did for the arms, I'm going for long legs, like a runner. As I usually do, I tried it first on cardstock, and with the dimensions nailed, I could go for another great material, which is, of course, styrene. But not just styrene, of course, some gribblies also, a donut-shaped thing just like the head. I traced the ties on the 3mm styrene sheets, broke it down using a snap knife, and did the finishing touches on the disc center. It took me a while, but I made the first layer, which I then used as a guide for a total of 6, 3 for each leg. With CA, I stacked them together, trying my best to keep the layers aligned. And the donut-shaped thing goes on the outside of each leg. Some extra sanding to remove imperfections, and more gribblies on the inside this time. This will make the connection to the waist. An extra pair of dome-shaped beads, well, not actually beads, because these are actually some buttons for clothing, CA glue and baking soda, and this was the result. Moving down to the sheen, which I made using some tubes and beads for the fake ball joints. And again, I'm repeating myself, but I'm using a lot of baking soda to hide my crimes. I won't lie, at that point I was kinda rushing to reach the deadline. This metal pin, a total overkill, will make the connection for the leg segments. And to make the fit, I chose some cool looking parts that I had at least a couple, and putting them together was also pretty quick. I just cut some excess parts, did some sanding to increase the surface area and help the glue, and attached everything together. And it worked pretty good. It sort of looks like some running shoes, which helps with the dash factor. But the sheens were still a little flimsy to my taste, so I grabbed some parts to go around it. Had I done this before attaching the foot and the thigh, my life would be much easier and I would probably go for another solution, but I guess it is what it is. I had to keep moving forward. This extra shape right here would be attached on the top of the shin, kinda close to the knees. Good thing I didn't have to break this one in the middle as it opened by itself. Made a small adjustment on the inner radius of that piece and glued it in place. And with that, the legs were finished. Off camera, I primed and sanded the parts and then later applied a coat of matte black spray. I wanted a dark base color for this guardian figure, and I was pretty happy with how this was turning out. I really loved the silhouette of the robot. But for the paint job, I went for something super simple. It is basically some purple highlights all around. And then I made a quick lime yellow wash for the seams. Weird and unexpected, but I'm making some creative freedom choices on this build, trying and experimenting some ideas that I had for a long time. Then it was time, of course, to put it together, which was also a pleasure. Now, before I show you guys the final result, I wanted to share the other creations from the Big Bot Bash community. A lot of awesome stuff from creators most of us already know and love. But in case you missed them, please check the links and send some love to these folks. There were a lot of entries, each one exploring different ideas thanks to the randomness of rolling the D20, which by the way is an awesome system that really challenges you. I certainly loved this quick journey. So yeah, please check the playlist and visit the other channels. And Bill, thank you so much for the invite. I really loved working on this project and can't wait for the next one. Now you guys know I wrote hot for the head, and for that I tried this crazy idea which just kinda worked. I'll be honest, I knew this was going to be challenging, rolling random numbers that would define the look of a project. First time I ever tried something like this, but I loved not only the process but also the result. And I'm even thinking of coming up with a similar process just for me for when I'm stuck or on a lack of ideas. But of course, I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments if you liked my entry for the Big Bot Bash. I certainly had a lot of fun working on it, and now my shop has a little guardian looking over me while I work. Thanks for watching.